Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of the Hoosier Life. And boy, do we have a historic one for you today. That is Josh Eastern on the other end, as usual. I'm still Michael Dugan. I always will be Michael Dugan. And we have a lot to get to today. We're going to get to your IU football preview. We're going to talk a little IU hoops. I know Jared and the guys are covering that very well so far. IU with that big win over Hope College to start off the season. But first, there's a bigger headline across the nation today in the sports world. Harry Carey said it decades ago. He was absolutely correct. Sure as God made green apples, the Chicago Cubs will once make the World Series. They did. They won it. Finally, the Chicago Cubs won the World Series. And much like Harry Carey said, it took a veteran manager, a team led by young stars from Bryant to Russell to Baez and everyone in between, with a mix of experienced veterans from David Ross to John Lester to Ben Zobrist and literally everyone in between them. And the greatest American sports drought is over, leaving only the greatest American celebration to be had this upcoming weekend and beyond into the winter and even the spring. Go Cubs Go right now is number 13 on iTunes. Yes, that is true. I'm looking at it on my screen. Go Cubs Go by Steve Goodman, number 13, ahead of Drake, Ariana Grande, and 21 Pilots. This is real life, people. And this is without question the most remarkable moment in sports since Josh and I have been born. I'm pretty sure I can speak for both of us on that. Josh, I could talk about this for days. I have so much to say, but I'll limit myself for the sake of time. I know we're getting to you guys live. For those live viewers, a little late in the evening, 9:20 Eastern is what it is right now. But where do you even want to start with this?
Where I want to start is those fans that have been with this team forever and ever. Those elderly people that have gone through thick and thin with this team, that just have really just they've been a part of this ride through the entire time that this drought has been going on. I watched plenty of videos last night of reaction from Wrigley Field. I walked down to Kirkwood down in Bloomington. Kilroy's was going crazy. Nick's was going crazy. People were honking their horns, W flags out of the cars, Go Cubs Go playing. I mean, it was just, you could feel the buzz around Bloomington just that day of. And today there were definitely less people in my classes than normal. Just really this whole country was just encapsulated by this incredible story. And you said it. I mean, nothing has ever happened like this. It's still kind of kicking in that the Chicago Cubs have won the World Series. It's truly incredible. And tomorrow's parade is definitely going to be, or Friday's parade, whenever you're listening to this, is going to be absolutely insane.
It's going to be absolutely epic. And they've already shut down pretty much the north side of the city. I know a lot of schools are closed tomorrow due to the celebration and because of traffic and road closures and everything. But it's just unbelievable. The scenes that were on Twitter of what's happened at Wrigley, and I don't know if this is confirmed, but I did see multiple tweets that people broke down the barriers at Wrigley Field and started to charge into the stadium. I have not seen photo or video evidence, but I mean, just based off the videos we saw just around that block, I have goosebumps just thinking about it, replaying it in my head. And I want to talk for a second just about, I think the thing that we need to appreciate the most, other than obviously, the obvious 108-year drought being officially over, is what Theo Epstein and the Ricketts family have done for this team and this franchise. It's absolutely indescribable, to be completely honest with you. I can say as many words as I can come up with, as many words as the dictionary has. It will not do it justice. It is so hard in sports for everything to go according to plan for one play, let alone an inning, quarter, possession, game, as even a season. You never see that happen. But for Tom Ricketts to purchase this team and to bring in Theo Epstein from Boston and to collectively have this 5-year plan that they say by 2015 will be in the postseason, and by 2016 they will be in contention for the World Series championship. To have everything go exactly how they planned it and follow every step of the way and watch it happen again for Theo Epstein and for the first time for this Cubs franchise in the history of time, it is absolutely incredible. The work that the front office did to get this whole thing started and keep it rolling it's impossible to describe in words. And my next point after Josh, you go next. My final point is pretty much the only solution that exists to put this into perspective and to show the people that aren't born yet, or the people that are, under the age of 6 or 7, that can't really comprehend this. And, it's unbelievable to think. I remember watching the NLCS, watching that wrap up. And I'm sorry if I go long here. I am a Cubs fan. For those of you watching, I've got my jersey on. There's a W flag behind me. I'm sure Jared's upset about that, but I hope he understands. I remember watching the NLCS, and after that, every single local station, I was in Chicago for it, at the bottom of it just said, Cubs going to the World Series, every single channel. And it felt, my friends and I all looked around and I said, this feels like we're in a movie. Because this is something that you've seen in movies or just in a parody TV episode or something. Cubs are going to the World Series, but it was real, and they did it. And the thing that I just can't wrap my head around is how they did it. They executed the plan perfectly from 2010 until this day. I'll never understand it. It's impossible. It's truly impossible for that to happen, but it happened because sports. That's all I have to say. Sports are incredible, and stuff like this does happen. Not often, but it does. And when it does, it leaves you speechless.
I was on Twitter last night, and there was a tweet. I read it, and it said, this whole rain delay is too corny to make a movie of. And that is just how insane that game was last night. You could not have asked for any better storylines. You start off with the leadoff home run. Then the Cubs get out to an early lead. The Indians come back, and then the Cubs get out to another lead. The Indians come back again. And then all of a sudden in the 8th inning, they're up 6-4, and Rajai Davis just decides to take matters into his own hand off of Aroldis Chapman, no less. Everything that went into that game last night was just straight out of a movie. Just every little detail, from the rain delay to Chris Bryant smiling as he came up to field that last ground ball, to there was just I go on and on. There's just so many moments, but the one thing that really stood out to me was Anthony Rizzo. After he caught the ball, he did this in the NLCS, put it in the back pocket. I just love that. That ball is going to be it's so valuable right now. I can't even describe it, just because that is the ball that won the Cubs the World Series. And I love how Anthony Rizzo, he did it in the NLCS, he did it again now, put it in his back pocket. He's keeping that one forever.
I don't even know how many commas and zeros there would be if that ball were to be auctioned off. I'm assuming it's going to be framed somewhere in Wrigley Field or somewhere where no one can touch it. But you touched on this, and I want this to happen tomorrow. I want it to happen. I want to wake up and to have this exist, but it won't happen for at least a decade. And this is my solution to trying to put all of this into perspective. Hollywood right now has the best sports movie of all time written out. The script is written. It happened in real life. There is no work. There's obviously work to be done, but there is no storytelling or story writing to be done. All they need is money, a top-tier director, and a good cast, and this will be the most beloved movie in the city of Chicago for the rest of time. Someone tweeted at me today saying that this Cubs story is closer to a 30 for 30 than a Hollywood film. First of all, you would struggle to fit a 30 for 30, a 60-minute 30 for 30 just on Game 7, let alone 108 years that have passed in that time. You simply cannot condense the story of this franchise, this saga, if you will, into a 60-minute TV documentary. There is too much history leading up to just 2003, and then in those 95 years of history, there's twice as much in the final 14 since then until this very day. You got Bartman in 03, the way that postseason played out, the way they played next year, Mark Pryor and Kerry Wood, the fall of them, 2008, the dark days of 09 to 2013 and 2014, the 5-year plan that worked, unlike 99.9 repeating plans in sports of any kind. It worked how it was drawn up. And finally, how you can close this movie is Game 7. You can switch between, like fever pitch, between actual footage and movie footage. I could go on and on. Someone hooked me up with the director. I'll spit ideas back and forth. I could talk literally 4 days about this. The favorites all year, And then once the postseason hit, after they had the best record in baseball and were clearly the best regular season team, once the postseason hit, they were always playing from behind. And when that happens to a favorite, rarely do you see them on top. And here we are. So the way that everything played out, it was a movie. And we watched the final scene of that movie with our own eyes over the past 21 days. And I just cannot stress enough how surreal this is. There are no words to describe it. I can't do it for the life of me, let alone in a 10-minute segment of a 40-minute podcast, which is why Hollywood, I now speak directly to you. The script is written. Go get that director and that cast and make it happen.
I am right there with you. I mean, just everything that played out, like I said, that rain delay is too corny to even put in a movie. That's how surreal last night was. But I would love to see just something remade about that night last night. I mean, Wednesday, November 2nd is going down in history forever. It was one of the best baseball. I think it was the best baseball game I've ever watched. It was the most watched baseball game in 25 years. Just every single thing about it was great. And I'd love to see both a 30 for 30 and a movie made about that. I think a 30 for 30, like that 4 Days in October one from the Red Sox, would be absolutely fantastic. I don't know. You could do so much with it. I just want to see how this all plays out over the next 5 to 10 years. I guess we'll have to find out.
That 30 for 30 will be a nice short-term solution in the next 4 to 5 years, but there needs to be a Moneyball or Fever Pitch or something. I mean, we've got Bill Murray. While he's still energetic, let's use Bill Murray to be the Jimmy Fallon of Fever Pitch for this Cubs movie. Let's do it. Let's get right to it. But, I mean, again, I'll save us some time, but it was just unbelievable watching last night play out. And the whole conspiracy theories that I ran into Will today, and he was telling me about these conspiracy theories, if you will. And then after this, we'll move on to IU football, your preview for this weekend. And he said, it was actually his birthday yesterday too, so a happy belated to Will. 108 years, we all know that number. Joe Buck only said it about 40,000 times. 108 seams on a baseball. In the 10th inning, the Cubs had got their 8th run, 1-0-8. I mean, it's take that however you want. I believe in this stuff. I think it was destiny this year. Just not necessarily this year, but the way that the year had panned out, I think it turned into destiny's team. And down 3-1, this team did not quit, and they provided not just Cub fans, not just Chicago citizens, but American sports fans with something that they will never forget for the rest of their lives. And I've retweeted a bunch of pictures from people from Chicago and at Wrigley. So go on my timeline. I'm at @M_Dugan44. It's unbelievable, from kids to 90-year-olds. It's truly breathtaking. And real quick before we go on to IU, I ran 2 Twitter polls because, I mean, the series was incredible. Game 7. Well, the series wasn't incredible. The series was okay, pretty good. It went to 7 games, so it can't be that bad. But Game 7 was absurd, much like the NBA Finals. That series wasn't great. Game 7 was unbelievable. And we had Chris Jenkins with the game-winning shot, and then Alabama-Clemson was great. So I said on Twitter, is 2016 the most exciting year in sports? Resounding yes on that poll. And I said, regardless of who you root for, overall, is 2016 the best year for sports that we've ever seen? 75% yes on both of those. So I think Twitter has spoken. We are toward the end of the most incredible year in sports that we've ever seen. And, hopefully there's more on the horizon for these teams in Bloomington. Hopefully there's more on the horizon for other stories and curses to be broken. But none bigger than what the Cavs did in June, and certainly none bigger than what the Cubs did last night.
Yeah, I mean, just everything that went into this series, this team for 108 years, it all built up to this. And it's pretty hard to kind of sum up what last night means for baseball in general, for Cubs fans in general, for people who have been around the game in general. But this is just great for baseball. Baseball was supposedly dying out. It's thriving. It is doing very, very well, and that's because of the Chicago Cubs and their story. And I just hope we get more and more stories like this. I guess the Mariners now are the longest or that have the longest drought without a World Series appearance. So maybe they're next.
Maybe, and what a year that would be for the assembly call interns if on back-to-back years both of those droughts could be snapped. But I mean, yeah, I've used up all the words I have to keep this a casual conversation. So we're gonna move on to IU football. But again, a night that I will never forget. Josh will never forget. Unbelievable. I ordered my World Series shirts at 7:50 this morning after going to bed at about 3:30. So let that tell the tale. But IU's got a must-win game this weekend. We've got to move on against Rutgers. You may think that that's a lock of a win, especially how they responded to some offensive struggles the past few weeks with that, whatever you want to call it. There were some great nicknames out there. I don't know if I'm going to repeat some of them on the air. You can go on Twitter if you'd like. But with Xander and Nate, that 1-2 punch right there, we'll see if that can get it done against Rutgers. Josh, give me a key to the game. What are we going to look out for here? Is the same thing? Can we mix it up? What's going to happen?
My first key is just ride the hot hand. I don't care if it's Diamont and AT, and that I called it the kosher bacon package. That's a good nickname, in my opinion. But just ride the hot hand. If Lego's coming out of the gate, I'm sure he's going to start the game first possession, first play. If he's playing well, ride him. He was the guy who was supposed to be the guy all year long. And if he's having a good game at the beginning, keep him in there. There's no reason to go to Diamont and Nate and give them any more run of play than they need, because if Lego's getting it done, there's no reason to take him out. He's your starting quarterback. You've got to stay with him. So, but if he's not working, then you really got to get Diamont and Nate in this game because it's a must-win. So it'll be interesting to see how Kevin Wilson goes about kind of managing this game, whether we see Lego for a long period of time or if we do see Diamont and Nate pretty early in the game like we did against Maryland last week.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to see more of Diamont and Nate than I would with Richard Lego. I look at Rutgers' numbers defending the run, 123rd in the country. Mind you, there are only 128 FBS teams. Rutgers has allowed 22 rush touchdowns on the year, 5.7 yards per carry, and over 260 yards per game. So, and if I'm IU, I know I'm going to win that battle in the trenches with that offensive line. And Divine Redding is poised for a huge game, which he had a couple of those last year. He busted a big run against Rutgers last year. I believe in the second half that should have sealed the game, but it unfortunately did not. We won't revisit that. But if I'm IU, I'm going right up the middle. I'm going around the tackles, and I'm trying to exploit this Rutgers very, very vulnerable rush defense. And I like what you said with Lego starting the game. He's your starting quarterback. I don't think you go right away with Diamont and Nate. When you have a package like this, we've seen a couple teams in the past do it, and you always start with the number one guy, and then once the offense gets going, that's when you start to work it in. So that's what I expect. That's what I think will happen. But I would love to see them run the ball more than they throw it.
Absolutely no. That would be. I mean we've been talking about this so much. Just run the ball and that'll open up the entire offense. And we saw that last week. They had 450 yards on the ground and another 200 plus through the air. So I mean it's not quite balanced, but it's definitely probably better to be more run heavy than more pass heavy. So that was good to see last week, and we'll see what happens this week. But my second key is get out to a fast start. Do not fall behind like you have on the road against teams like Northwestern and teams like Nebraska. I know Rutgers is not even close to either of those teams, but you still cannot afford to get behind early in this game. You've won 2 Big Ten road games since 2012. You cannot afford to not win a third come Saturday. You need to win this game, and you need to get out to a fast start. Do not let Rutgers get any momentum because they haven't won in the Big Ten. They really haven't been close in the Big Ten. They almost beat Minnesota a few weeks ago. But don't give them any sort of hope. They're at home. Whatever sort of momentum they may have, don't let them build off of that. You need to smother that right off the bat, get out to a 14-0 lead, and then just get out of there. Get out of there with a win.
Yeah, and I'm hesitant to agree with you when you say start hot because we know they did last year and they just couldn't finish. But this is a team this year that has just played lockdown defensively in the second half, and it's happened pretty much every single game, and they've fought back in every single game. And I love the grit that this team has and the way that they fight back. And we've seen it pretty much every game, including Wake Forest, which is a complete debacle. They had a chance in that one. It was slim, but it existed. And I'm hesitant to agree with you, but at the end of the day, if they don't start hot, it's not easy playing from behind. We have not seen them really come from behind other than Michigan State and pull out a win. And it's something that I would love to see them do is start hot and then keep their foot on the gas and continue to step on the throats of the Scarlet Knights. And we'll see if that happens. But if they don't start hot, especially on the road, no matter who you are or where you're playing, if it's an in-conference game, if you don't start hot and you've got an early deficit, it's tough to climb back.
Absolutely. It's especially key on the road. And with this football program, just their history, playing on the road, it's not kind to them. And it would be such an Indiana thing to go to Rutgers and lose and beat Penn State next week. But let's hope that doesn't have to happen. My last key is just win, baby. Just find a way to win. It's Rutgers. I know they're terrible, but they did come back from 28 points last year, and they weren't much better. So find a way to win. I don't care how it happens. If we score 6 touchdowns on defense and none on offense, whatever, just make sure it happens. And I want to go back to my prediction from last week. I said we were going to get 3 turnovers, and one was going to be for a touchdown. There were 2 turnovers, and one of them was almost returned for a touchdown. The defensive lineman decided to fall on it instead of take it in the end zone, so that was really, really close. But this week, I'm going to call at least 2 Tom Allen takeaways. I'm feeling some more turnovers come this weekend.
And this is a banged-up Rutgers offense, too. You look at their leading rusher and their starting quarterback. They're both a little banged up. They've missed some action as of late the last few weeks. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see if they go, and we'll see what happens. But this is a very vulnerable Rutgers team, healthy or not. And they do have to win this game because Penn State, although we will disagree with this, is ranked number 12 now in the college football playoff. I could not agree less, but that's neither here nor there. The point being, Penn State's legit, believe it or not. And Saquon Barkley is the best running back in the Big Ten. I'm sorry, Justin Jackson, you're number 2. And this is a team next week that's going to come into play. And IU cannot get caught sleeping. They cannot get caught looking ahead at that game, and they have to take Rutgers seriously. So if they can do that, jump out to a hot start and just run the ball down their throats and play with tempo, they should have no trouble winning this game. And I know it happened last year, but this is a Rutgers team that's not as good and an Indiana defense that is at least 9 times better than it was last year. I feel much better about this game despite it being away from Memorial Stadium. And if the Hoosiers can just play their game, they'll win this one. I'm not nervous.
I agree. No, I'm with you. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say the Hoosiers are going to win by 3 possessions at least. I think they reach at least 30 points in this game. I think they're going to just run away with this game early. I like how they're kind of coming together. It's fine that they've kind of struggled on offense up until now, but last week was good. They finally got things on track. Now it's time to move forward and just keep getting better. I know getting the 6 wins is huge, and I know we probably wanted more out of this season than just 6 wins, but at this point, just take 6 wins, get to a bowl game, and everybody will be happy. I'm going to go Hoosiers 31. I'm going to go probably 13 points for Rutgers. I think this Indiana defense is going to have a big day, and the offense is going to play well as well.
I'm going to take Indiana by at least 20, and that's the kiss of death right there. Book it for not happening. But I'm going to take Indiana by at least 20. The one thing that sticks out to me is Rutgers' margin of defeat is almost 20 points. They score 18 a game, and they give up 37. So I'm just going to leave it there. I mean, that's not really Big Ten football. No offense to Rutgers. They're definitely in a down year right now, and there's only up to go. I hope they get a Big Ten win because it would be nice for those guys. I hope it doesn't come this week, but they are without question the worst team that the Big Ten has to offer. And Indiana, I think, will dominate this game in every aspect.
Yeah, no, this is a bit of a prove-it game for Indiana. It's on the road. This could be labeled as potentially a trap game for Indiana because Rutgers is just playing terrible. I think I saw in a poll they're like 115th out of 128 programs in the country. I mean, they're just absolutely terrible. Indiana they have to find a way to win. You've got to win this game. Rutgers is terrible. Get some revenge for last year. Whatever motivates you to get out of New Jersey with a win, you just got to use it.
Exactly. And we are running a little quick on time here, so we got to move on. That's your IU preview, and just a little number for note. The spread right now, I believe, is 14. Josh and I are both taking the Hoosiers to cover that, so write that down as the kiss of death. Josh, IUBB. The Hoosiers open up their hoop season this week. They play again on Saturday. They defeated Hope College by 30 after a pretty slow start. I was not there. I did not go. I saw clips. I saw brief moments. I was busy watching the Cubs. I apologize. I hope you all can forgive me. But Jared and Will and Ryan and Andy did a great job of breaking that one down. They told you everything you need to know. But, Josh, do you have anything to add for that? Anything that stood out to you? Anything that concerns you? Anything at all?
Yeah, just a few little points. Just kind of want to piggyback on what they were talking about the other night. First of all, I mean, it was just great to be back in Assembly Hall with the new renovations and all that. My first point is Devontae Green. I didn't really know what to expect with this freshman class. Devontae Green was absolutely impressive. He played 13 minutes and it's 17 points. I don't care who you're playing. That is efficient and that is effective for this Hoosier team. They're going to need that with him coming off the bench. Second, Deron Davis is going to be very good in spurts. He is a huge body. I mean, I am telling you, he is built. He is tall. He is going to be great coming off the bench, but in spurts. Because he's so big, I don't know how his stamina is quite yet. It's been one game, but he wasn't in there for long periods of time. He was in there in spurts, and he was playing very, very well. I know this Hope College team was very undersized, and that's because they're a D3 team. And so be it's an exhibition game, but he's going to be effective. He's a big body, and he's going to grab some big rebounds for this team, give Thomas Bryant a break when he needs it, and then get Thomas Bryant back in the game. But Deron Davis will be good, and he's going to get better, I think, as the years go on. My third point was it was kind of their big point in the Assembly Call email that came out Wednesday morning, and that was positionless versatility. That was really, really impressive to see Juwan Morgan bringing the ball up the court. He's 6'7", 6'8". He's dribbling up the court with no problems. And then you had Thomas Bryant feeding the post. You had just a lot of other guys doing a lot of little things that they wouldn't normally do under their normal positions. They were very versatile. And that's what Tom Crean talked about after the game, and that's what he wants moving forward. And it'll be really interesting to see how that kind of all comes together, either for Kansas 8 days from now or as the season moves on. Plenty of time to get things going before Kansas and then North Carolina at the end of the month.
Yeah, and look, I'll add this my 2 cents right here, and then we'll move on to our uninterrupted. This is a banged-up Hoosier team. They're not totally healthy, and there's a lot of new pieces. And some old faces are playing in new places, and they've got different roles. So this is a team where, and the guys are going to touch on this and go very in-depth, but with this Kansas game, I'm not looking at the scoreboard. I'm looking at how Josh Newkirk can fill that point guard position, because I fully expect that at some point or another this year, he will fully take over that load as this team's true point guard. And I don't know when that's going to happen. I'm not certain if it's going to happen. That's just what I think. Total educated guess. It's not coming from out of the locker room or any coach or anything. That's just what I see as a fan, as a follower of the program. I see OG being a big piece. I see Thomas Bryant being a big focal piece. And obviously we've got threats with Blackman and Green, like you said, and Davis and Jones and all these guys. But with this Kansas game, I'm not looking at the scoreboard. I'm looking to see how these new guys fill their roles and how fluid they play as a team on offense and in transition back to defense. So keep your eyes out for that in the Kansas game. Obviously, we want to pull out the W. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. Anything can happen, and it won't even be that huge of an upset. But if it does end ugly, and if the Hoosiers do not come out on top, and you hear writers completely writing off Indiana, saying they'll finish 5th in the Big Ten, don't listen to that for 1 second, because we heard that last year after UNLV, Wake Forest, and then Duke, and that was in December. And then we all know what happened after that, and we ran into a team that was 50 feet away from winning the national championship. So don't listen to what anyone says. Listen right here. This team will be good. It will take time. I don't know how much time, but this team will be good regardless of what happens in that Kansas game in 8 days from this Friday, where we are live right now. So, Josh, I mean, that'll do it for IUBB, and let's go on to Uninterrupted. I've got one that it's not quite controversial, but it'll spark a little bit of a conversation, and it's kind of happening right now. So do you want me to go ahead and lead us off?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
All right. So this is something that will never be fixed in sports, and it's fun to have a conversation about it for a certain period of time, because after that it gets old and taboo and honestly just straight up annoying. So I'm going to keep this somewhat brief. But this World Series, I mean, I feel like baseball, no one was complaining about, no loud voices were heard about complaints about umping in baseball, and no one was happy with the job anyone did. It wasn't consistent behind the plate. I think replay is an issue. I don't think that a team should be allowed to review it before they decide if they want to challenge. I think that's a rule that needs to be tinkered with a little bit. But now it's official that all major sports have a fan base that hates the refs and think they're terrible, and a casual fan can go in and do a better job. And I agree and disagree with you at parts if you're going to go and argue that. But here's one thing that I think would make a serious change to the NBA, and that's the league that the officials take the most heat in. So, in the NFL, we've got Cam getting hit and pass interference. They're a mess. The biggest flop in the NBA – I'm sorry, I got to the point too quickly. The biggest flaw in the NBA in terms of the officiating and the rules is flopping. And right now the fine is minimal. It's incredibly minuscule when you're talking about a guy that's fresh off an $80 million contract, a guy named Timofey Mozgov, who is making the most absurd amount of money I've ever seen for a guy of Timofey Mozgov's caliber. And the fine that they get for these flops is minuscule in that context, and it's even smaller when you're in the playoffs and you're going for that championship ring. So I'm not going to sit here and rant about the refs, but I'm willing to make this interesting. We all know flops are big. In the playoffs, it can halt momentum. If you're on a 6 or 8-0 run, someone on the road team flops and you get called for a charge, fans are pissed, momentum slows down. It happens again, momentum is completely flipped. Next thing you know, you're calling a timeout and you're down by 3 in the third quarter. It does change games. It doesn't happen every time. It doesn't happen every night, but it can happen, and it does happen. The penalty, again, minuscule. Now, how is this for a proposal for a new rule? In the NBA, this is what I'm calling for right now, to minimize flopping. Coaches entering the game get one challenge. They can challenge any flop call, and it's a 90-second review. The refs review it for 90 seconds. If you can't make the call stands, but they review it for 90 seconds, and they have a chance to overturn it to determine whether or not it was a flop. If the coaches win that challenge, the call is reversed, so it is no longer a charge, whatever it is. The flopper gets called for a flop, which is a technical foul, and you get your challenge back. So if you keep calling these flops and you keep winning, you keep challenging. If you call it once and you get it wrong, you're done. You call it once, you get it right, you get another. Once you get it wrong, you're done. I think it's the only way to, and obviously, let me add this. NBA players in the NBA, you're tossed after 2 technical fouls. You get called for 2 flops, you're out of here. You think a $5,000 fine is going to stop Draymond Green from having his team choke in Game 7 of the NBA Finals? Absolutely not. 2 techs tosses him. You flop twice, you're gone, no questions asked. I think it's an interesting rule. Flops drive me crazy because it's so obvious and the refs miss it and the big names get the calls. I think it's an interesting conversation to have. Josh, what do you think? Could that solve it? I think it'll solve it better than these small, these chump change fines, if you will, for these NBA superstars. But do you think that this could actually have a positive effect on the game?
I have 2 things. First, don't ever watch soccer then. Second, I think this could be interesting. I see where you're going with this, but I don't know if fans are really going to be in love with more replay. I mean, we see replay in the NBA now, and it takes plenty of time. It just takes you out of the flow of the game. There's more timeouts and all that. And there's already plenty of timeouts that go into NBA games. Just like baseball, it just slows baseball's slow to begin with, and then you slow it down with a replay. And then in the NBA, the final 2 minutes of a game take forever. I mean, I see where you're going with this, but maybe just raise the fine instead. And I know these guys are getting paid millions and millions of dollars with the new salary cap and the new TV deal and everything that goes into that. But I don't know. It's an interesting proposal. I don't know how quick the league would actually want to adopt that, though.
Two quick things, and then I'll let you go. One, in terms of timing, that's why we cap it at 90 seconds. You see these baseball replays, sometimes they go for 4 minutes, and that seems like an eternity. You cap it at 90 seconds. If you can't decide, you've done the best job possible, and then the call stands. You can't overturn it after 90 seconds. It shouldn't be overturned anyway. So you cap it at 90 seconds there, and I forgot my second point. I apologize for that. Second time that's happened on this show. But I think it's interesting. And here's my second point. With that, these $5,000 fines. If you get called for a flop in the first quarter and you're fined $5,000, you make up for that by the 4-minute mark in the second quarter. These guys don't care. And everyone's going to get upset if you fine them $100,000 for throwing their arms up in the air. There's no real way to win, I think, with the fine. I think it's an interesting conversation. I'm not trying to solve it right here. I'm just trying to get the conversation started and going. So I think a rule change at some point needs to be in place because it affects the game in a way that it shouldn't, especially when the wrong call is made, and that makes it even worse.
Yeah, I mean, flops are just an interesting thing. I mean, I was watching soccer the other day, and you get a yellow card if the ref deems you to flop. So, and in a yellow card in a soccer game, that's a pretty big thing because 2 and you're gone. But my topic that I'm going to talk about is college football playoff. We saw the first rankings come out. We all knew the top 3 were, or maybe even the top 4 were going to be pretty set in stone. We got a little bit of a twist to the tail here with the number 4 team, and that was Washington being number 5 and Texas A&M, who I didn't really have even on my radar, coming in at number 4. But it's interesting to see how the committee is going about placing these teams in there because you have Alabama, obviously SEC, and they're incredible. Clemson in the ACC, they played a pretty good schedule so far. Michigan, they play in the Big Ten. They played a good schedule so far. Then you get Washington, and they have the weakest non-conference schedule in FBS, and I understand that. And it's kind of tough if you're Washington because you scheduled Rutgers a few years ago because usually you're scheduling teams 5 to 10 years in advance. And when you scheduled Rutgers 5 to 10 years ago, they were actually like a decent program. Now they are the bottom of the barrel in college football, and it's tough to now have to play these games against bad teams. And I know it's a Power 5 team, but it's not really your fault if they're really, really bad and you're trying to build something big. And Texas A&M, I know they play in the SEC, so they have Alabama stapled in their schedule every year. They have LSU in their schedule every year, Arkansas. All those good SEC teams are in their schedule every year. And when you're Washington in the Pac-12, and this is a down year in the Pac-12. Stanford's not good. Oregon's not good. The second best team is either Washington State, Colorado, or Utah. That's the top 4. That's a huge drop-off from Washington, who's trying to make something happen up there in Seattle. And it's interesting to see how the committee is going about kind of disciplining Washington for not playing a good non-conference by putting them at number 5. But the one thing I'm happy about this whole situation is they're punishing Washington now and not down the road because they're sending a message now that you need to play a tough non-conference schedule. And Washington went out today. They're playing Auburn in 2018 to open the season. That's a step in the right direction. But it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. If Washington wins out and goes to the Pac-12 championship and wins it, I'd have to assume they'd be in the college football playoff. Just interesting scenarios that could happen coming down the stretch.
Yeah, hard to imagine that you could leave out an undefeated team right there. And one thing I want to respond to there is I'm looking at this right now, and how on earth can you sit there and tell me that Ohio State deserves to be ranked above Louisville right now? It blows my mind. Louisville's one loss, their one loss was on the road to the number 2 team in the country that was undefeated last year until they ran into Bama, and they lost by 6. And they steamrolled Florida State. They steamrolled Syracuse. They blew through the first portion of their schedule, and 2 wins, Duke and Virginia, have been close. Duke was 10 points. Virginia was a touchdown on the road. And Lamar Jackson is without question the best player in college football. In my eyes, some people may disagree, but if you watch this guy play, it's just unbelievable. And you look at Ohio State, they pounded Rutgers. They handled Indiana. They snuffed out a win at Wisconsin. They snuffed out a win at home against Northwestern. They beat Oklahoma, who was just getting their money's worth from Iowa State up until about 20 minutes ago. I mean, their best win is at Wisconsin by a touchdown in overtime, if I'm not mistaken. That's a 2-loss team. And Louisville has steamrolled good teams, a thing that Ohio State has not. And it wouldn't matter if this were their ranking in September. I wouldn't waste my breath. But it's November, and this could cost Louisville if Ohio State wins out. And we'll see what happens. But at this point right now, I'd like to take this week by week. I think Louisville has done more than Ohio State, and I don't think it's that close.
You have an interesting point there because Louisville they've played a very tough schedule. They've only lost once. But I think what the committee is looking at is, well, one, Ohio State lost on a blocked field goal. I mean, of all fluke plays, I know they still lost the game and everything, but it's a blocked field goal. That's really tough. Second, Louisville should not have been in close games with Duke nor with Virginia. Virginia's not good. They're trying to rebuild that program. You need to go in there if you're the so-called 5 or 6 team in the country, and you need to go in there and beat them handily. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Louisville is really in a tough spot right now. Houston has really hurt themselves because Louisville, that was like their big game coming down the stretch because most of Louisville's games were at the beginning of the year that were important for their scheduling. But it's going to be tough for Louisville unless Clemson loses or Florida State loses another one.
It is going to be tough. And I can't even imagine if we have one or fewer undefeated teams, and that would leave 3 one-loss teams. If Louisville is a one-loss team by the end of the season and they beat the remainder of their schedule, I'm not asking them to win by 50, but if they can convincingly beat the remaining teams on their schedule, which is, Boston College on the road, Wake Forest at home, Houston on the road, and then Kentucky, they should do that. Are you really going to keep them out of the playoff and put 3 one-loss teams ahead of them after what they did in the beginning of the season? And if they run the table convincingly from here on out, and that one loss being to Clemson, especially if Clemson wins out, I just think it's so interesting, and we get caught up, and we'll move on to our Power 5 after this, but we get so caught up in conference championships, and that's partially why the Big 12 never gets any love. And if you don't play in your conference championship, the unwritten rule is you shouldn't be in the national championship. I think that's bogus, because there are it's rare. It's rare that I think that this situation would apply. I haven't seen it really ever, with exception to LSU, Alabama a few years ago, and that's a separate conversation. But if Louisville wins out and Clemson wins out, the fact that Louisville's not playing in the ACC championship does not mean that they're the 3rd best team in the SEC. You could still argue that they're number 1. I think Clemson's work so far, despite being undefeated, is less impressive than Louisville. I mean, they haven't blown anyone out. They almost lost to Troy at home. It's unbelievable. And I would be very upset if both those teams win out and Louisville got left out, especially with the most electrifying player college football has seen in years.
It's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out. I doubt we're going to get 4 undefeated teams. So let's just leave it at that because, I mean, we have – I think I was looking at some stat. There were 2 – I think 2 or 3 teams that started in the first top 4 of the college football power rankings ended up in the college football playoff at the end of the year. So it's going to be really interesting how this all kind of plays out. And we'll transition into our power rankings now. So with the Cubs win last night, we had to kind of talk about and put this game in perspective, kind of the top 5 most transcendent sports moments of kind of our generation, past 30-ish years. We didn't want to go back all the way into the 40s with the whole Jackie Robinson and the Jesse Owens and all that, because those were obviously humongous moments. We want like real sports moments and sports games and sports happenings that actually happen. So I'll start off with my 5. We'll do them all at once. My 5th is Landon Donovan's goal versus Algeria in the 2010 World Cup. That was a humongous moment. just as an American. I mean, that was just a huge, huge, huge moment. Soccer's this whole new big thing. It was the last game of the knockout stage. If he didn't score that goal, the U.S. was going home. But instead, he gave America a moment, gave U.S. soccer a moment, and he gave soccer a big stage in the United States. And he's kind of that guy who's kind of propelling soccer on, and he was kind of that pioneer at the beginning of the whole big soccer movement here in America. So that's my number 5. My number 4, David Tyree's catch in Super Bowl 42, going up against the undefeated Patriots. They would have been the first team since the Miami Dolphins in 1972 to run the table. David Tyree basically ended that. He set up another touchdown for the Giants, and they ended up winning that Super Bowl. So that's my number 4 moment. My number 3, the first baseball game in New York after 9/11, Mike Piazza against the Braves with the home run to center field, and that was just a humongous moment for America. I mean, baseball is America's game, and he gave America a humongous moment in New York City. That was a fantastic moment. My number 2, kind of moving quick here, but my number 2 is the Cubs winning the World Series. I mean, just for 108 years, they've been the lovable losers. They haven't won, and they finally got their moment to shine, and it was great to see that last night. One of the best sports moments I think I've probably ever been alive for so far. But my number 1, I wasn't alive for it. I've seen movies about it. I've seen 30 for 30s about it. The Miracle on Ice. How could you not have that be the number 1 in the heat of the Cold War, in the Olympics, the U.S. beating the Soviet Union, and just that whole, I mean, it was just a humongous moment in American sports, in world sports. That's what the Olympics are there for, and the U.S. shined on the brightest stage, and that was really, really awesome to see. So Miracle on Ice is my number 1.
Full disclosure, and I'm sure you all saw this coming, I can't disagree with your 1 and 2. So my number 1 and my number 2, I'll save you all the time. It's in that order, and I'll start with my number 5, and I'll just touch on them later. My number 5 is the Red Sox winning the World Series, and I think just because that's such a passionate fan base out in Boston and such a storied franchise, you could rattle off 10 legendary names from the 1919s to the 2000s, and all those 100 years of just legends and droughts, and that 86-year drought and Fever Pitch, a great movie. Whatever they call the Cubs movie, in my opinion, is going to be slightly better, but Fever Pitch, nonetheless, great movie, and that story is just unbelievable. That team was incredible, and the way they did it, that those 4 nights in October, unbelievable 30 for 30, an unbelievable story, and again, a story made for a movie. Number 4 for me comes from this year's Olympics and the 2012 Olympics, and no, it is not Michael Phelps. It is not Michael Phelps. It is the women's gymnastics team, because how often do you hear, we had that team from a few decades ago that you see on those MasterCard commercials during the Olympics all the time, but the Fierce Five in the Final Five stole the hearts. These 10, 18-year-old girls stole the hearts of America twice. And because, they win team all-around gold, and Jordan Weber crying when she missed the cutoff, and Gabby Douglas went ahead and won over America, and Simone Biles did the same thing this year, and Allie Raisman did the same thing twice, and Michaela Maroney came an instant meme online with her not impressed face. I mean, they were the talk of American sports for a long time after 2012, and they were on every talk show possible. And the same thing this year, Lori is on Dancing with the Stars. And I personally love the gymnastics portion of the Olympics. A lot of my friends are the same way. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. It's just a thing. So they're my number 4. My number 3 is Michael Phelps. And not this year, not just 08, not 2012, but Michael Phelps in general in the Olympics as an American. And you look at 08, that photo finish en route to 8 medals, 8 for 8, passing Mark Spitz's record, an IU grad. Unbelievable. And that photo finish in the 100-meter butterfly was a race that I'll never forget, and an Olympic moment I'll never forget. And that Chad Leclos, Rocky, whatever you want to call it, right in front of Phelps, and then Phelps comes out, beats him, and Leclos gets 4th. It was just icing on the cake. And just Michael Phelps is so subtle and calm celebration. It sent all the messages that needed to be sent, and it was just unbelievable. And the fierce Final Five and Michael Phelps, it just made us proud to be Americans in the sports world just for a second. And the Olympics, the thing about the Olympics is there's always going to be turmoil in the world, and there's always going to be these terrible things that we need to be distracted from just for a little bit of time. It's not something that should be ignored. But every once in a while, we should be distracted from them. And once every 2 years with the Winter and Summer Olympics, we get a chance to. And every single time we see a Michael Phelps or a Simone Biles or a Gabby Douglas come out and do that for us. And it's great to see. And it's a great moment as an American. And my number 2, I talked about it, and I'm not going to go into detail just for the sake of talking for the next 5 hours. Cubs World Series, and number 1 is the Miracle on Ice. Again, we weren't alive for that. We weren't even close. We don't need to be. We know that's number 1. So yeah, that'll do it right there for my top 5.
Yeah, I mean those Olympic moments are so great. It really captivates the entire country, and even with the World Cup, anything with the USA emblem on it is big for America. America comes together like none other for these huge events, the Olympics, the World Cup, whatever it may be. They all come together, and it gives you a sense of some patriotic pride, and that's what those events are there for, is to make you feel good about your country that you support, and your athletes hopefully give you those moments to remember.
Yeah, and it seems to happen every single year. Not every single year. Every 2 years, we seem to have some hero come up in the Winter and Summer Olympics, and we could rattle off names left and right, but we're definitely running out of time here. So we'll save you guys the time for that and have you reminisce on your own. So that'll do it for us. Don't forget to tune into Jared and the guys after IU Bellarmine, after that Hope College victory, and then it's regular season time, and we got the Kansas Jayhawks 8 days away from right now, at least 7 from when you're listening. So absolutely pay attention for that. IU, a must-win game on Saturday against Rutgers, 12 a.m. Eastern kick, if you are listening before that game gets going. That'll do it for us. Thank you guys for tuning in to a memorable edition of the Hoosier Life, episode number 17. We're creeping up to number 20, Josh. It's getting crazy over here. But yeah, that'll do it for us. Thank you guys for listening. This was a lot of fun, and we'll talk to you guys next week.